I treat this as a review, use this demand or supply function. But now I realize that, you know, in order to make sure everyone stay on the same page, I want to go a little bit, deeper regarding those mathematic form. If you have, if you feel comfortable with those stuff, right, in the previous section, that's just, you can quickly go through this. I introduce you the general form, like this demand and supply already, right? And I also briefly introduce you this the function. But I want to emphasize that those functions are very important, especially in the economics. I mean, in the mathematical way that we want to, put things together. All right, so we can estimate for example, in this case is the quantity demand, and then by the price, income, price of substitutes, price of complements, okay, and then also like a people's preference. I mean, those are like, say, that we put together to, to trying to use a mathematical way to come up with the idea. This is a very important part in our economic study. So use econometrics models to estimate, all right, and then to, kind of prove or predict. Okay, so some of the result. A demand function is look like this. This is like the QD is the quantity demand, right? And then this A is like just the intercept, or you call this a constant term. And then, those, how to say that, the small, not capitalized, the small letter of A, B, C, D, those are like the coefficient, okay? So also we call this parameter. And then also that the variables, or we call the explanatory variables, like the price, income, M stands for the income. And then those P are the substitution, and then tau is the preference, PE is the complement goods, and N is the number of consumers. Okay, once we put this together, and then we use, in this case, we use a linear form. And also we can try to use other form, like simply speaking, like a quadratic form or cubic form, or even like those exponential, like log. The future, if you go, if you study higher level economics, then you will know, okay? The demand function, use those variables all together. And then I will give you a quick assignment to use this idea and then estimate the parameter. For example, if the price increase, what is the B? So if we have a data set or historical data, whether we can estimate the B. If we know that the income in the previous decades, whether we can estimate the small c. Okay, this is the idea. We know that this is a potential relationship with the correlation, with the QD, the quantity demanded, right? But we want to know those A, B, C, D, E, F, the slope parameter. If I included a, like only a P, this is a two-dimensional, right? The two-dimensional diagram. But if I put a M, this will become like a three-dimensional. And then, the diagram we can draw is only up to two explanatory variables, or the 3 dimensions. It cannot be, further. Like, could you tell me that what is the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, fourth dimension in our real life? It can be like, the 2 dimension is the surface, right? And then the 3 dimension is our world. But what about the fourth dimension, time? Probably. Then what is the fifth dimension? No one knows, okay? Even sixth, fifth, seventh. And then, but use this algebra form, you can easily to indicate. Although we cannot visualize, but we can easily to indicate the relationship. First of all, the law of demand we have mentioned. We use a very simple form, which is the QD equal to a function of P. Okay, so if we remember that we have mentioned about the ceteris paribus, that means that we assume everything stay fixed. Only the P, the price change. And then in this case that we can draw a diagram like this, okay? We can draw a diagram like this. This is our demand curve, okay? So this is a linear form. And then the law of demand means if this is the Q, okay, this is the P. If we have the Q increase when P falls, And then in the mathematical form, this can be reversed. What does that mean? If you put the Q on the right-hand side of the equation and put the P on the left-hand side, then this becomes the inverse demand function. Okay, it's okay, it's the same, because if we have the historical data, we have P, we have Q, and then that we set up the function, it doesn't matter, right? I mean, these are equivalent. The relation is this a negative or downward sloping curve, okay? And then we can draw this, use this two-dimension diagram. But one thing I needed to remind you is quantity demand is on the horizontal line. The vertical line must be the price, okay? But anyway, so this is the diagram that you can use this use this demand function you can draw. And then also there are the dots on this line. You can draw that dot. Although that I try not to make it more complicated, but the idea you have to know that it challenges your mathematical, let's say that the capability, right? Whether you can do this, first of all, you can have a function, you can draw the lines, and then you can find the dots on these lines. Okay, so, or I give you different dots, and then you can connect them and come up with a demand function. Okay, change in quantity demand means this is moving along. All right, moving along the curve, quantity demanded, and you need to make sure you understand this part. Okay, if I talk about the change in demand, that means this is the shift. And then let me draw this for you. This is the shifting, okay? This is the shifting. You can shift it to the right side or you can shift it to the left-hand side, okay? Simply speaking, if this is a P and then Q, this is the two-dimension diagram, and anything else, remember that the long function, anything else, income, price of substitutes goods, price of complement goods, and a number of people, this all come up will shifting that, will shift this, let's say that the demand curve. We already discussed that, but just make sure that you understand what is the quantity demanded, to change in quantity demanded, or the change in demand. Now I can save us a little bit time. Instead of drawing a demand curve, now we are drawing a supply curve, right? This supply curve, simply speaking, this supply curve is a upward sloping. And then this means the K, the small k, is a positive coefficient or positive parameter. So this is the law of supply, right? Keep that in simple. Those are all, let's say, the other factors. I mean, if we are talking about the supply or production, you think about, okay, so what is the price of import, price of other substitute goods, price of complement goods, technology. The last F is the number of firms, or let's say that the competitions. It's more like a big pie. I mean, if we have many companies, and that means that each individual company will only produce a small part. So keep that simple, but the only thing is the K is a positive one. And then we can draw a upward sloping the supply curve, right? The other things are very similar. We can have a, the inverse supply, right? This is the, this is a directly supply function, but we can also have a inverse, right? This is the inverse supply function, means that we have the Q on the right-hand side and we have the P on the left-hand side. But anyway, so this won't affect the relationship of this upward sloping curve. Again, this is a linear function, okay? So we can draw a straight line, but it doesn't matter. We can draw another line like a little bit curvy line. By saying that, you know that this, there is a function behind, okay? So usually we only draw, again, we usually draw the quantity supplied and then the price. And then also, similarly, if we're talking about the change in quantity supply, means this is moving along the supply curve. If we're talking about the change in supply, this means the shift of the supply curve, all right? To keep it simple, if we have the Q, if we have the P of the product, that's okay, we draw this line. But if any change other than those factors, and then this becomes the shifting of the supply curve. Imagine if you have like the technology change, all right, like SpaceX. I like SpaceX a lot. And then very likely, this supply, let's say that the supply of those, let's say rockets, okay, so that the send it to the outspace. And then this supply of rocket can be, how to say, increase a lot. This shifted the, the supply curve to the right. Example is the number of firms, right? It shifted the supply curve to the right. But if we have other things, for example, like the import price, I like to use the gasoline. If the gasoline price increase or the crude oil price increase, this will increase the cost. And then very likely this will reduce the supply. So this goes to, this curve shifted to the left. Then equilibrium. So this is more like the two curves interact with each other. So we know at that point, at that equilibrium point, that we have the QD equal to the QS. Okay, so, and then this is more like the supply meet with the consumer, right? Supplies meet the consumer, and then they got this is, we call this market clearing or the equilibrium price. Okay, and then use the diagram. As you can see that it's easy, right? If we have like the A, which is, that the let's say the first equilibrium, but in that case that we can have the demand curve shift, and then we can also have the supply curve shift. In this case, demand increase and then the supply increase, and then we get to B. The price increase and quantity increase, but it is not necessary, because if we have the supply, increase more, then you see that the point of C is end up lower than the original P. Okay, so this, it depends on that who is shifting more. But usually, as we explained before this, we only give you the example of like one curve shift, but not the simultaneously shifting. But I just use this, I just want you to know that the simultaneous shift can be happen, all right? And then that will be very different scenario. In this case, that you see the demand is decrease, right? Demand decrease, but the supply increase. And then we end up with the P is lower. In general, that I want to summarize you, the point is like, if the demand is decreased, okay, the price is going down, right? And then if the supply is increased, the price is going down. In that case, that this can be, one thing can be sure, the price is down. But the previous example, because we don't know, because the supply shift or supply increase, this is the price decrease, but the demand is also increased. In this case, is the price increase. So this might cancel with the offset with each other. So we don't know, which one is become the dominated, right? And then also we will see that that will be the case of the demand. The demand shifted to the right, demand increased, but the supply decreased. Okay, but in that case, you can see that the one thing I can show is, in this case, the price is going up. So generally, this can be also like a demand decrease and a supply decrease. So in this case, that both decrease means the quantity will decrease. I don't know about the price in this case. Okay, so this four are different scenarios, but usually I won't test you or give you a further, let's say, challenges on that. But just make sure you understand that the shift can be happened at the same time. And then also like this, just trying to link this with the real life scenario. One thing I want to add is like, the situation, the scenario can be even more, complicated, because in this case, we just assume they have like a general, let's say that the elasticity, right? But if we assume that the demand and supply, they have different elasticity, so which I will explain you the elasticity in the next chapter. But in this case, I want to share with you the slope can be different, right? And then the shifting and then the equilibrium will be very different.